It's such an honor and a privilege to be here amongst all of you. What I want to do is start with Modeh Ani, How Grateful Am I? And it's the version by Joey Wissenberg. So. Modeh Ani Lefanecha Melech V'kayam 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 Yadadadai Yadadadai Yadadai 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 Yadadai. What I invite you to do is just take a few moments and let those words of gratitude or the melody or the song or the nigun sort of course through your body, finding where it lands. And if you're comfortable, take a few deep breaths just in a particular way, with a deep breath in and a sigh or some resistance on the exhale. And it's been shown that that kind of breathing actually increases your parasympathetic relaxation response. So let's just do that a few times with a slow in-breath and a sigh as the out-breath. In-breath and relax with the sigh as an out-breath. One more time, in-breath and sigh with the out-breath. So I want to focus on gratitude, but I'm going to start with the story. So we have identical twin grandsons who are now 10 years old, Ethan and Zachary. And my son and daughter-in-law, as Hanukkah was approaching, suggested that we buy them Apple Watches. They don't have a phone, but with an Apple Watch they could text, they could do other monitoring. Of course, not during the school day, it would be off. And we were more than happy to do that. And one of the additional benefits we realized is we now can connect with our grandsons without having to go through their parents. And if you're a grandparent, not having that blockade or that extra hurdle is just amazing. So after about a month, and this was beginning of February, I texted them and I said, I want to ask you something. I want to give you a call and ask you whether you'd be willing to do something with me. And of course they said yes. Now, just as background, my father-in-law, their grandfather, who passed away about 2.5 years ago, was a Holocaust survivor. And they knew him very well. And so this is what I said. I said, your great-grandfather, Max, was the most grateful person I have ever met in my entire life. He would wake up every morning being grateful for everything. And he didn't go up with any religious background. He didn't know about the prayers. He was just grateful. And all day, he would say to people, I thank you. I thank you. Even when he was getting ill, he was just the most thankful person. And so I asked Ethan and Zachary, I said, I'd like you to help me with something, whether you do this with me. I would like to text you every morning for something that I'm grateful for. And I'd like you to text me every morning for something that you're grateful for. And it doesn't have to be the biggest thing in the world. It doesn't have to be different every day. Would you be willing to do this? Because it'd be very helpful. And actually, I say this to you, I didn't say it to them, like giving me the zerazut of like, keep going. Because if I just had to do this by myself and write something down, it wouldn't happen. It wouldn't happen. And of course they said yes. And it's been 3 months, and over 90%, 95% of the time, they respond to me. I'm too afraid to stop, so I know I'm going to keep doing it. And I also realized I'm doing it, this gratitude practice, out of love. And that's where it's coming. It's coming out of a place of love. And I had this thought that many times when we get different teachings about midot or spiritual practice, the examples are often, I was faced with the problem, and then I paused, I realized there was a problem, and I instituted a mindfulness practice of some sort that actually helped with the problem. But this is different. The question is there something about the practice we're doing that changes the way we show up in our lives, and not only how we respond to an obstacle that we perceive? And that's what I want us to sort of consider. And I realized that, did I do this because I have a meditation practice or a mindfulness practice or that? I don't have a controlled experiment. I mean, I'm not going to do it again. But, without all of this, but my sense is this practice has led me to that, has led me to being more open-hearted, which I believe this lev tahor, this leading with a pure heart, has been really critical in developing this sense of gratitude. So this is my suggestion for the practice today, is to be aware of your heart. And what I'd ask you to do is to try to find your pulse. And if you're comfortable using your pulse as the anchor, you can find it in your wrist, you can find it in your neck, you can put it over your heart. Sometimes if you put your fingers together, you can feel your pulse. And sometimes when it's very quiet and very still, I can sense my heart beating. So if that's something you're comfortable with, if you can't find your pulse, 2 things. 1, I know you're still alive and have a pulse, so don't worry about it. And you can always find another anchor, or you always can go to another anchor. So we're going to start with the pulse, and sometime in between this sit, and we have plenty of time to sit, I'm going to say something. And this is in sort of the smooth pond of awareness and maybe stillness. I'm going to drop a pebble. I'm going to make a suggestion and then see what happens, see what arises. Without a story, without elaboration, just notice what happens. So let's start with sitting with the pulse, if you're comfortable. And I think we have about 18 minutes that we can do this, 18, even 20 minutes. So sometime halfway point, I want to give us plenty of time to sit. I'll do this suggestion. So I invite you to sit whatever way is comfortable, but in an alert, dignified manner. Maybe your shoulders back a little bit, your head up. It was suggested to me at a retreat I was on that pretend that you're actually seeing through where your visual cortex is, your occipital lobe. If you pretend that you're seeing through there, you actually sit up a little bit straighter, but no tenseness. And your eyes can be opened or closed. And just find your pulse. Use your pulse as your anchor. And you can notice maybe beat to beat variations, maybe it changes with your breath. And let's just start there. I invite you from this time that you're aware of the heart to repeat to yourself the following question or statement. I am grateful for. I am grateful for. And see what arises out of love. And thoughts, sensations, emotions. But just notice them. Don't tell a story. Just notice whatever arises. And if something doesn't arise now, no problem. It may arise later. And we'll continue that way till the end of the sit. lefanecha melech chai v'kayam modani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam modani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam modani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam yada da 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 yada da 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 yada da yada da da yada da da yada da da yada da yada da yada da yada da yada da yada da.
So much, John. That was just a beautiful practice. Thank you so much. And we seal it as we do each day, friends, by offering an opportunity for those of you who are in mourning, observing a yard site, or if it's your custom to join in the mourner's Kaddish, to do so. We just stay with our practice, as John was encouraging, inviting us to do, to offer our hearts in support of those who are in mourning. So if you're not reciting Kaddish, you're encouraged to stay present and offer your open-hearted support for those who are. Thanks to Jet Bachman, who's holding our text space today, as always, so skillfully and with so much grace, for sharing the words of the Kaddish on the screen. If you'd like to share the name or names of those you're honoring today in the chat box now, or after we recite Kaddish, you're welcome to do so. And if you are reciting it, I invite you to join me by rising in body or in spirit, and you can unmute at this time.
Yes. Al Kaddish Rabba Yama Devra Hirute Yam Yalchete Cheyechon Yom Lechon Sheye Dechol Bek Israel Alam Bisman Karim Imru Amen Rabam Rabam Yivrach Olam Omein Omaya Bak Bach Arar Ar Mam Nase Adar Alef Halal Edisha Bechu Lin Kol Shirata Rifata Nenechamata Damnimra Dalmamimre Shlama Rabban Min Shmaya Mechayim Aleinu Be'alkol Yisrael Bimuru Amen Oseh Shalom Bimramav Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Be'alkol Yisrael Be'alkol Yoshvei Teval Bimru Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Again, a Shavua Tov. Thanks to our teacher for today, Dr. Jonathan Silver, for leading us in such a beautiful gratitude practice. Looking forward to some conversation with John about the practice and the teaching in a moment. And as always, you're welcome to stay on for that conversation, or to ask a question or share a reflection on the practice, or just to use this time and space for the next 15 minutes or so to stay with your practice and to sit with your pulse or whatever anchor you have chosen for yourself for your practice today. If you're leaving us now, just a reminder, we'll be on a short break tomorrow, Tuesday through Thursday, but back on Friday at our regular time for our mindfulness meditation with Rebecca Schisler to lead us into Shabbat together. And just a reminder again, next week as well, a week-long series on gratitude, beautifully set up by today's practice, led by John. And we hope you'll join us then. So if you'd like to ask, I'm going to put in the link in the chat, by the way, a link to YouTube video of Joey Weissenberg singing that beautiful version of Moda Ani that John shared with the Hadar Ensemble, Joey Weissenberg of the Rising Song Institute of Machon Hadar. And if you have a question or want to just share a reflection, of course, the chat box is open now. And if you have any questions for John, you can put them in there. John, I'm just going to lead with the, once the lines of communication are open to the grandkids, thinking about my grandkid turns 1 this year. So when are you too young for that? But I'm more curious about how that actually worked out. How long have they kept it up? Have you kept it up? How long did it last?
We're still going.
That's great.
We're still going. We started, I looked back, February 7th. When they were in London, they didn't do it, but I still did. When I was in our retreat with Marcelo, I still did it and they did it because I thought it was worth doing. So I'd say 95% of the time they are doing it. Sometimes I say, I'm grateful for this, and they go, me too.
Mm-hmm.
Fine, that's good enough. Sometimes they say, sometimes they're grateful that they're playing baseball, they have a backyard. It's all good. It's all good. There's no bad answer. So occasionally I have to give a nudge, but I'd say 95 times out of 100,
beautiful.
They're there.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's a beautiful thing to share, but also to connect it with your father-in-law and his gratitude, which leads me into the next question I have, and I'm going to keep an eye out for questions in the chat as well. But you were, of course, you described your father-in-law, Zichrono Libracha, as someone who sounds like, just exuded gratitude, right? I guess I could ask you whether you think that was related to his experience as a survivor, how that was, because that's not necessarily true of all survivors, of course. But it may have been his particular response to his experience. So maybe to explore that a little bit, but then you were suggesting to us, I think, that this practice, this mindfulness practice, meditation practice specifically, kind of prepares the conditions for us to be able to experience a greater or deeper sense of gratitude. Yeah. So I want to invite you to speak a little bit to that, how in your experience that works, that this helps the gratitude to flow more easily in your experience.
So the first question about my father-in-law, Max, who, we could spend the whole 15 minutes going through his story, because he escaped with his parents and his brother the day before the Vilna ghetto was liquidated. They were hid out for 10 and a half months in a hole in the ground in a Polish farmer. And the Polish farmer did this out of gratitude for something that my father-in-law's father did, as far as forgave a debt. My father-in-law's father owned a truck company, and a Polish farmer couldn't pay, and he said, "You'll pay me later." It was that Polish farmer that sent them a note that said, "If you get out, I'll hide you. I'll take care of you." So if you want to know, that's a pretty big lesson.
Paying it forward, yeah.
Yeah, we can obviously go into many details about Max, but that's the thumbnail sketch of that. And so the question is how the practice or the mindfulness practice like leads to something like this. Because it certainly wasn't something that I was thinking about. It was just something that all of a sudden dawned upon me, like, wouldn't this be great to do? Because I've wanted to do like a gratitude practice, but I don't have the ziruzut to do. I mean, I'm pretty good at regimenting and doing something like when I put my mind to it, but like keeping a journal and doing this, like it just doesn't work. And I thought, this would be this would be good under many ways, right? It's certainly good for me, and it's certainly, we'll see what they remember about this time, because I also know it's going to stop. I know everything's impermanent. I've been told many times in many different teachings, like everything is impermanent. So this will stop at some point.
Yeah.
I don't know when. So.
Well, it might stop, but it strikes me that I imagine it's hard for me to imagine these kids when they're adults not remembering this for the rest of their life, and perhaps passing it on. But maybe that suggests, what it suggests to me, like your father-in-law's story about the paying it forward, strikes me as a possible mindfulness practice as well, that in any given moment, of course, we have been the beneficiaries, like that farmer had been the beneficiary, right? We can be, when I'm not necessarily conscious of or mindful of all the things that have been done, all the kindnesses that have been done that make my life possible in any kind of way. I mean, I become most aware of that in the small moments, like at the cashier, or the bus driver, when you say thank you, when all of a sudden you realize you have an opportunity to move from mindless unawareness of what's being done for me, I'll speak for myself, to saying, oh, someone is doing this for me. It's not just the bus driver, for example, but the people who service the bus overnight, the people who clean the bus, all the things that I do not enter my mind. In any given moment, I can become, or eating, of course, as well, right? Who prepared the food, who trucked the food, who, et cetera, et cetera. So I wonder about that in terms of preparing the ground, or like you were put it so beautifully, preparing the heart for it, in terms of, like, you created a process of setting aside a time to think about something that you're grateful for. And that one piece of that could be, at least for me, is that idea of thinking about how it has been passed along to me.
Right. And I think I didn't realize, I didn't think about it, but actually until this retreat that I was just on with Marcella Bronstein, I didn't sort of connect that the loving open-heartedness was really a prerequisite for the feelings of gratitude, for the gratitude practice. I had it, that was like something I just became aware of like 2 weeks ago.
Right.
It's not old knowledge, but it seems to make sense that when you have open-hearted feelings, you're gonna, in loving kindness, you're gonna have more compassion, you're gonna have more gratitude.
Well, conversely, and I want to bring this back to a couple of things you suggested that we do when we are less anxious, less worried, less, critical, either of ourselves or life or what, or the future. That creates the possibility for gratitude to arise more naturally. So you did a couple of things that help, both I want to talk about the use of the pulse as an anchor in a moment, but also you said something about the posture and about imagining. I wanted you to, just because, Doc, we need a little help here with the anatomy. I don't know what you were referring to, but the part of the brain, imagining that we see it out of that part of our brain. So where is that? And how,
right. So
how do you
actually,
do that?
so full attribution. This was from Judy Stern, who was on the retreat with me, who also teaches Alexander technique. She said, like, the posterior part of your brain is the occipital occipital cortex.
Just right back
That's
here?
that's where the vision gets processed.
Huh.
So she said, imagine if you're seeing out of the back of your head and immediately you kind of like sit up straighter. That was an interesting experience. Like,
Mhm.
oh, like I never thought of that.
So we really can see out of the back of our head.
Yes, yes.
All right. So what about, all right. So then the pulse, first of all, I know, you're a psychiatrist, not a cardiologist, but you helped us. What led you to think about the pulse as an anchor, and how might
Right.
that be different
Right.
qualitatively than, the breath or sensation or et cetera?
Well, one, it's different. It's different than the breath because when you breathe and you're aware of your breath, it's hard not to think about how you're breathing and breathing at the same time. Right? It's tricky, right?
Right.
Because your awareness of your breath actually influences how you breathe.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard not to dissociate those two. It's easier to associate like hearing or feeling your feet on the floor. The pulse came again. Marcelo Bronstein did that while we were on our retreat. He said, like, be aware of your pulse. Oh, that's neat. Let me play around with that. So I had never thought of it before. And the pulse is certainly some way connected to your heart, right? So I thought, let's just play around with that. And I think it's important. I mean, we all, or I, get in the habits of using the same anchor all the time,
Yeah.
right? Because you're used to using that anchor, you always use that anchor, and when you don't use the anchor, you go, "Oh my God, this meditation sit doesn't count because I'm not using the right anchor," right? So next time I'm going to use the right anchor, right? Because so many teachings throughout the breath.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's nice just to like be a little
Yeah.
lighthearted and play around with
Yeah.
what you're, and there'll be
Well,
another.
this is, I think it's a really powerful one because it requires one to quiet oneself, really, to cultivate stillness and quiet. It's almost like listening for the koldamama.ka, right? The still small voice, to be very quiet, very still. And then all of a sudden you feel the vibration, right? You feel the vibration, which I never really thought about this, but, it's like joking about you being not a cardiologist, but, or the heart centered, because I always say, oh, the heart. Then I always think about the heart, the actual organ, the heart. But the pulse, although of course it's generated, I guess, by the pumping of the heart, it courses through the whole body. Like you pointed out, you can feel it here, you can feel it here, you can feel it here, you can feel it here. You can feel it just by, if you're quiet enough, you can just feel the beat in our bodies. And it struck me that's such a beautiful entree to the idea of what do you mean when you're talking about a heart-centered practice? It's really being attuned to the beat of our own aliveness, and and doing that with other people, and being aware of the aliveness around us. I'm grateful, John.
Yeah.
I'm grateful.
That's it. And something I didn't say, but I could have said, maybe I'd say another time, is when you start thinking about something else, like when I gave that suggestion,
Mm-hmm.
is there any change in your heart? Is there any change in your pulse?
Mm.
Because when you get more anxious, or right? I mean, there are different things that we do actually changes our pulse. It's actually a monitor, for different emotions, right?
Yeah.
So would you notice when you have more gratitude, as if you're more anxious, is there a change in your pulse?
Well, I was just glad I was alive to notice I was alive. So thanks for that. How about, do you want to take us out with one more round of Modani?
Sure.
Thank you. Let's do that. Thank you. That's by everyone. Just
Or you can play Joey's. Then you won't want to hear me.
No, that was just fine. It's really beautiful.
Joey's really good.
Yes, he is. But this is excellent. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to do this. Modani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam modani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam Ya da da da, ya da 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 da, ya da da, ya da da da, ya da da da, ya da 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 da, ya da da, ya da da. Yada-da, 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 yada-da.
Beautiful, John. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jet. Thanks to each of you for being
Thank
here.
you.
John,
Thank you,
Yom
Jay.
Huledet Sameach. Many birthday blessings for you of health and joy and wonderful expressions of gratitude with grandkids. And thanks so much for bringing that gratitude practice to us today.
And as usual, I can't read the chat. So
I will save it. I'll save it for you.
but
And
thank you for all the comments. I'll read them.
I will pass on the gratitude, and we'll see you folks hopefully on Friday. Be well until then, and thanks so much.
Okay.
Many blessings, everyone.
Okay.